She appeared at his door like a ghost from his past, claiming she knew his deepest secrets. But the real secret was why she'd spent 5 years thinking about him. The clock on Jake's phone showed 9:47 p.m. when he finally pushed open the door to his small apartment. His shoulders ached from sitting at his computer all day, fixing code that seemed to break faster than he could repair it. The startup company he worked for was demanding, but the paycheck helped him survive in the expensive city. Jake kicked off his shoes and let them land wherever they wanted. His apartment wasn't much to look at. A tiny kitchen, a living room that doubled as his office, and a bedroom barely big enough for his bed and a small dresser. But it was his space, and after 3 months of living alone, he had gotten used to the quiet. The breakup still stung sometimes. 3 months felt like yesterday when he thought about how quickly everything fell apart. One day they were planning weekend trips. The next day she was packing her things and explaining why they wanted different futures. Jake had spent weeks replaying every conversation, wondering what he could have done differently. He grabbed a frozen dinner from his freezer and stabbed holes in the plastic with more force than necessary. While the microwave hummed, he checked his phone for the 100th time that day. No new messages. His ex had unfriended him on social media, and most of their mutual friends had naturally drifted toward her side. He couldn't blame them. She was more outgoing, funnier at parties, the kind of person people remembered. Rain started tapping against his windows as he ate his dinner straight from the container. The weather matched his mood perfectly. Outside, the city lights blurred through the water streaks on the glass, making everything look like a painting that hadn't dried yet. Jake was halfway through scrolling mindlessly on his phone when 3 soft knocks interrupted the silence. He froze with his fork midway to his mouth. Who would visit him at this hour? His landlord, maybe, or perhaps someone had the wrong apartment number. He walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Standing in the hallway was a woman with dark hair plastered to her head from the rain. She carried a small black bag and kept shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Something about her seemed familiar, but he couldn't place where he knew her from. Jake unlocked the door and opened it slowly. The woman looked up at him with eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 stories. She was around his age, maybe a year or 2 older, with the kind of face that became more interesting the longer you looked at it. "Jake?" she said, and her voice carried a hint of uncertainty mixed with relief. "Yes," he replied, still trying to figure out who she was. "I'm Alex. We knew each other in college. I was in your literature class junior year." She paused and tucked a wet strand of hair behind her ear. "I know this is completely unexpected, but I'm in town for just one night, and I was wondering if I could stay here. I can sleep on your couch or even the floor. I just need somewhere safe to spend the night, college." Jake's mind raced back 5 years to his literature classes. Slowly, the memory came back. Alex had sat 2 rows behind him, always asking thoughtful questions that made the professor smile. She had written a paper about loneliness in modern fiction that had impressed everyone in their small discussion group. They had talked a few times after class, but nothing beyond friendly conversation. "Alex, right, I remember now," Jake said, though he was still processing the situation. "Are you okay? You look soaked." "I'm fine, just dealing with some complicated travel plans. My flight got delayed, and the hotel I booked apparently doesn't exist anymore. I tried calling a few other people, but you were the only person I could find who still lived in the city." She shifted her bag to her other shoulder. "I completely understand if this is too weird or if you can't help. I should have called first." Jake looked at her standing in the hallway, dripping rainwater and clearly uncomfortable. Something in her expression reminded him of how he had felt 3 months ago when his world turned upside down. Lost and needing help, but too proud to admit it directly. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "You'll catch pneumonia standing out there." Alex's shoulders relaxed as she stepped into his apartment. "Thank you so much. I promise I won't be any trouble." Jake closed the door and watched as Alex looked around his small space. She didn't comment on the frozen dinner container on his counter, or the pile of unfolded laundry on his couch. Instead, she seemed to take in the details. The book scattered on his coffee table. The photo he had forgotten to put away that showed him and his ex at a baseball game. The stack of unopened mail he had been avoiding. "I can make some tea," Jake offered, suddenly aware that he should be a better host. "And I have some towels so you can dry off." "That would be amazing," Alex said, setting her bag down carefully by the door. As Jake moved around his kitchen, putting the kettle on and grabbing towels from his linen closet, He kept glancing at Alex. There was something different about her presence in his apartment. She didn't fill the space with nervous chatter or apologetic explanations. Instead, she seemed comfortable with the quiet, as if she understood that some situations didn't need to be over-explained. "Here," Jake said, handing her a clean towel. "Thank you." Alex dried her hair and face, then looked at him directly. "You seem different than I remember from college." "Different how?" "Quieter, more thoughtful, maybe. College Jake was always rushing somewhere, always busy with something." Jake poured hot water into 2 mugs and added tea bags. It struck him as odd that she remembered details about his college personality, when he could barely remember their conversations. "I guess a lot changes in 5 years." "It does," Alex agreed, accepting the mug of tea. "Mind if I ask what you do now?" "I work for a tech startup. We build apps for small businesses. It's not as exciting as it sounds." Jake sat down on the opposite end of his couch from where Alex had settled. "What about you? What brings you to the city?" Alex wrapped her hands around her mug and was quiet for a moment. "I'm here to finish something I should have dealt with a long time ago. Sometimes you have to face things you've been avoiding." The way she said it made Jake think she wasn't just talking about whatever had brought her to the city. There was a weight to her words that suggested bigger themes, the kind of unfinished business that kept people awake at night. "That sounds serious," Jake said. "Life gets serious when you're not paying attention." Alex replied with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They drank their tea in comfortable silence while rain continued to hit the windows. Jake found himself studying Alex's face, trying to reconcile this composed woman with his fuzzy memories of the college student who had always seemed to understand the deeper meanings in their assigned reading. "I hope you don't mind me asking," Alex said eventually, "but are you doing okay? You seem like you're carrying something heavy." Jake almost choked on his tea. How could she read him so easily? They hadn't spoken in 5 years, yet somehow she had picked up on his recent struggles within minutes of entering his apartment. "I'm fine," he said automatically, then realized how unconvincing that sounded. "Actually, no, that's not true. It's been a rough few months." Alex nodded as if she had expected that answer. Sometimes the hardest part is admitting that things aren't fine. Jake looked at her more carefully. There was something in her eyes that suggested she understood exactly what he meant, as if she had experience with her own rough months. The coincidence of her showing up tonight, when he had been feeling particularly isolated, seemed almost too convenient to be random. But maybe that's how life worked sometimes. Maybe the right person showed up exactly when you needed them most, even if you didn't know you needed them. Jake finished his tea and set the empty mug on his coffee table. The rain outside had gotten heavier, creating a steady rhythm that made his small apartment feel even more cut off from the world. Alex had been quiet for a few minutes, just looking around his living space with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You know," Alex said suddenly, "you always did this thing in college where you'd organize your books by color instead of by author." Jake looked at his bookshelf, surprised. She was right. His books were arranged in groups of similar colors, something he did without thinking about it. "You remember that?" "I remember a lot of things about you," Alex said, then seemed to catch herself. "I mean, from our class discussions. You had interesting perspectives on the books we read." There was something in her voice that suggested she remembered more than just classroom conversations. But Jake didn't push. Instead, he found himself curious about what else she might have noticed about him back then. "Like what?" he asked. Alex smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "You always sat in the same spot, 3rd row, 2 seats from the left. You took notes in blue ink, never black, and you had this habit of tapping your pen against your notebook when you were thinking hard about something." Jake stared at her. Those were incredibly specific details about someone she claimed to barely know. "That's pretty observant." "I notice things about people," Alex said simply. She got up from the couch and walked over to his small kitchen counter, where his mail sat in a messy pile. "Like how you've been avoiding opening these bills for at least 2 weeks. Jake's face heated up. "How could you possibly know that?" Alex picked up one of the envelopes without opening it. "The postmark dates. Plus, you keep glancing at them like they're going to attack you." She set the envelope back down gently. "Money troubles?" "Not exactly troubles," Jake said, feeling defensive. "Just budgeting challenges. The startup isn't paying well. It pays okay. I'm just not great at managing money since..." He stopped himself. He had been about to mention his ex, but that felt like too much personal information to share with someone who was essentially a stranger. "Since your relationship ended?" Alex asked quietly. Jake's mouth fell open. "How did you—" Alex nodded toward the photo on his bookshelf that he thought he had hidden well enough. "Baseball game photo, but you turned it face down. There's a lipstick mark on the frame that suggests someone else lived here recently. Plus, your apartment has that specific kind of emptiness that comes from someone moving out and taking half the furniture." Jake looked around his apartment with fresh eyes. Alex was right. There were gaps where things used to be. The empty spot on his bookshelf where his ex's novels had lived. The single couch cushion that looked lonely without its partner. Even his refrigerator seemed too empty for one person who used to shop for two. 3 months ago, Jake said, surprising himself by admitting it. "She said we wanted different things." "That's rough," Alex said, and her sympathy sounded genuine. "Did you?" "Did I what?" "Want different things?" Jake thought about it. "I thought we wanted the same things. A nice apartment together, maybe a dog. Weekend trips to places we'd never been. Simple stuff," he paused. "But she wanted to move across the country for her job. She wanted adventure and new experiences. I wanted stability and routine." Alex nodded slowly. "Sometimes people grow in different directions. Doesn't mean either person was wrong. Then why does it feel like I failed at something?" "Because you're measuring yourself against someone else's definition of success," Alex said. She moved back to the couch but sat closer to Jake this time. "You think stability is boring, but some people spend their whole lives looking for what you naturally create." Jake looked at her, puzzled. "What do I naturally create?" "Safe spaces. Places where people can be themselves without judgment." Alex gestured around his apartment. "Even with all the mess and the unpaid bills, this place feels peaceful. It feels like someone could tell you their secrets here and know they'd be safe." The way she said it made Jake's chest feel tight. No one had ever described him that way before. His ex had often complained that he was too quiet, too content to stay home, not ambitious enough about seeking new experiences. "I don't think my ex would agree with that assessment," Jake said. "Your ex needed something different than what you offer," Alex replied. "That doesn't make what you offer less valuable." Jake studied Alex's face. There was something almost familiar about this conversation, as if they had talked this deeply before, though he was certain they hadn't. "Why are you really here tonight, Alex?" Alex was quiet for a long moment. She picked up her mug even though it was empty and held it in both hands like it was warming her. "I told you I was here to finish something I'd been avoiding." "Right. Business stuff?" "Not business exactly." Alex looked directly at him. "More like personal things that I should have dealt with years ago." "What kind of personal things?" Alex set down her mug and turned to face him completely. "Do you believe that some people come into your life at exactly the right moment, even if you don't realize it at the time?" "I don't know," Jake said honestly. "Maybe. Why?" "Because sometimes you meet someone who shows you something important about yourself, but you're too young or too scared or too distracted to really see it. And then years pass and you spend all that time trying to find that feeling again with other people, but nothing quite matches it." Jake felt his heart speed up. "Are you talking about someone specific?" "I'm talking about you," Alex said softly. Jake's mind went blank. "Me?" "Our conversations in college weren't just casual class discussions for me," Alex said. "You probably don't remember, but there were a few times when we talked after class. Once you walked me to the library when it was raining. Another time we ended up at the same coffee shop and sat together for 2 hours talking about books and life." Jake searched his memory. Slowly, fragments came back. A conversation about loneliness in literature that had turned into a discussion about real loneliness. Walking across campus while Alex talked about her family and her fears about the future. Sitting in a crowded coffee shop but feeling like they were the only two people there. "I remember some of it," Jake said, "but I thought you were just being friendly." "I was scared to be anything more than friendly," Alex said. "You seemed so sure about what you wanted from life. You talked about wanting to build stable things, create lasting relationships. I was terrified of commitment back then. I kept thinking I needed to experience everything and meet everyone before I could settle down with anyone. So what changed?" Alex laughed, but it sounded sad. "I spent 5 years experiencing everything and meeting everyone. I traveled to 12 countries. I had relationships with people who seemed exciting and unpredictable. I built a successful career that took me to different cities every few months." "That sounds amazing," Jake said. though something in her tone suggested it hadn't been amazing at all. It was empty, Alex said simply. All of it. I kept looking for that feeling I had when I talked to you. Like someone really understood what I was thinking. Like I could be completely honest and it would be okay. I never found it again. Jake felt like the room had shifted somehow. So you came here to tell me that? I came here because I'm leaving the country next week for a job in London. It's a huge opportunity, but it's also permanent. And before I go, I needed to see if what I remembered about you was real, or just something I had built up in my mind over the years. And? Alex smiled, and this time it was the kind of smile that changed her whole face. It's real. You're exactly the person I remembered. Only better. You're still thoughtful and kind, and you still make spaces feel safe. But now you also have this depth that comes from going through difficult things. Jake didn't know what to say. He felt exposed. Like Alex could see right through to parts of himself he kept hidden from everyone else. But instead of feeling uncomfortable, he felt understood in a way he hadn't experienced in months. I don't feel very deep, Jake said. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping up with basic life tasks. That's what makes you real, Alex said. You don't pretend to have everything figured out. You let people see your struggles, which makes them feel less alone with their own. The conversation hung in the air between them. Jake realized that for the first time in months he felt truly seen by another person. Alex wasn't trying to fix him or change him or convince him to be more ambitious. She was simply recognizing who he was and suggesting that who he was had value. What happens now? Jake asked. I don't know, Alex said honestly, but I'm glad I came here tonight. I'm glad I got to see you again and tell you what you meant to me. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside Jake's small apartment, something had shifted. The emptiness he had been carrying for 3 months felt lighter somehow, as if Alex's words had filled in some of the gaps that his ex's departure had left behind. The clock on Jake's phone now showed 11:30 p.m. 2 hours had passed since Alex arrived, but it felt like they had been talking for days. The conversation had moved from surface level catching up to something much deeper, and Jake found himself saying things he hadn't said out loud to anyone. You know what the strangest part is? Jake said, leaning back against his couch cushions. I feel like I'm talking to someone I've known forever, but we barely knew each other in college. Alex tucked her legs under herself on the couch. She had changed from her wet clothes into one of Jake's old college sweatshirts, which somehow made the whole situation feel both more comfortable and more intimate. Maybe we knew each other better than we thought. Sometimes you can understand someone in a few conversations better than people you see every day. Is that what happened with us? I think so, Alex said. Those talks we had after class weren't just random conversations for me. You said things that stuck with me for years. Jake tried to remember what he could have possibly said that would be worth remembering for 5 years. Like what? Like when you told me that the best relationships weren't about finding someone who completed you, but finding someone who helped you become a better version of yourself. Alex smiled at the memory. You said that during our conversation about the characters in that novel we were reading. The one about the couple who kept missing each other at different times in their lives. The memory came flooding back to Jake. They had been walking across campus after class, and Alex had asked him what he thought about the book's ending. He had gotten carried away talking about love and timing and how people sometimes meet the right person at the wrong moment. I remember that conversation now, Jake said. You disagreed with me. You said relationships were about adventure and discovering new sides of yourself with different people. I was 21 and terrified of commitment, Alex said with a laugh. I thought settling down meant giving up on possibilities. I thought if I stayed with one person too long, I might miss out on some amazing experience with someone else. And now? Alex was quiet for a moment, looking down at her hands. Now I've had all those different experiences with all those different people, and I realized something important. The adventures and the new experiences don't mean anything if you don't have someone who really knows you to share them with. Jake felt something shift in his chest. What do you mean? I mean, I've been to beautiful places and met interesting people and had relationships that looked perfect from the outside. But I was always performing some version of myself that I thought would be more appealing. I never felt like I could just be completely honest about who I really was. And you think you could be honest with me? Alex looked directly at him, and Jake saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. I think you're the only person I've ever met who made me feel like being honest was safe. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls had moved closer together. Jake was acutely aware of how near Alex was sitting, how the lamplight caught the highlights in her hair, how her presence had transformed his lonely apartment into something that felt alive. "Alex," Jake said, and then stopped because he didn't know how to finish the sentence. "I know this is complicated," Alex said softly. "I know I showed up here out of nowhere and I'm leaving next week, and this whole situation probably seems crazy to you." "It does seem crazy," Jake admitted. "But not in a bad way. More like unexpectedly right." Alex's expression changed, becoming more vulnerable than she had been all evening. "Can I tell you something that might sound strange? After everything else tonight, I think I can handle strange. I've been following your life a little bit over the years," Alex said, and Jake's eyebrows went up. "Not in a weird way," she added quickly. "Just through social media and mutual friends from college. I knew about your job and your relationship, and when it ended, Jake wasn't sure how to feel about that." "Why?" "Because I never stopped thinking about those conversations we had. I kept wondering what kind of life you were building and whether you had found someone who appreciated the things about you that I found so compelling." "Things like what?" Alex seemed to consider her words carefully. "Like how you really listen when people talk instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. Like how you notice small details about people that make them feel seen. Like how you create this atmosphere where people feel safe to be vulnerable." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I don't think I do any of those things particularly well." "That's exactly what I mean," Alex said, and now she was smiling. "You don't even realize the effect you have on people. You just naturally create space for others to be themselves." She shifted on the couch, moving closer to him. Jake's heart started beating faster. "When I saw that your relationship had ended," Alex continued, "I spent weeks thinking about reaching out to you, but I didn't know what I would say. 'Hi, remember me from college? I've been thinking about you for 5 years and wondering if you ever think about me too.'" "Do you think about me?" Jake asked, though his voice came out quieter than he intended. "More than I should," Alex said. "More than made sense for someone I barely knew." The space between them on the couch felt charged with possibility. Jake found himself studying Alex's face in the lamplight, noticing things he hadn't seen earlier. The way her eyes crinkled slightly when she smiled, the small scar above her left eyebrow, the way she bit her bottom lip when she was thinking about what to say next. "So when you decided to come here tonight," Jake said, "what were you hoping would happen?" Alex took a deep breath. "Honestly, I was hoping I would discover that what I remembered about you was just nostalgia, that you weren't actually as special as I had built you up to be in my mind. That way I could stop wondering what might have been and move on with my life. And instead I discovered that you're even better than I remembered," Alex said. "You're more thoughtful, more genuine, more comfortable with yourself. And now I have to figure out what to do with that information." Jake felt like they were approaching something important, some kind of decision point that would determine what happened next. The rational part of his mind reminded him that this woman was essentially a stranger, who would be leaving the country in a week. But the deeper part of him, the part that had felt empty for months, was responding to her in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. "What do you want to do with that information?" Jake asked. Alex didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood up from the couch and walked over to his bedroom doorway. Jake watched her, confused about what she was doing. "Your bedroom is exactly what I would have expected," Alex said, looking into the small room. "Simple, comfortable, peaceful. Like everything else about you." She turned back to look at him, and there was something different in her expression now, something more direct and intentional. "Jake," she said, "I want to be completely honest with you about something." "Okay." Alex walked back toward the couch but didn't sit down. Instead, she stood in front of him, close enough that he had to look up at her. "I didn't come here tonight just to catch up or even just to tell you what you meant to me in college." Jake's pulse quickened. "What did you come here for?" "I came here because I wanted to see if there was still something between us. Something real that we never got the chance to explore." Alex paused, seeming to gather her courage. "And I think there is." The room felt completely silent except for the rain still hitting the windows. Jake looked up at Alex, seeing the vulnerability in her face, the way she was putting herself out there despite not knowing how he would respond. "I think there is too," Jake said quietly. Alex smiled, and it was the kind of smile that seemed to light up the entire room. Then, without saying anything else, she moved toward his bedroom. Alex, Jake said, standing up from the couch. She turned back to him. I know this is moving fast, she said. And I know it's complicated. But I also know that sometimes you only get one chance to find out what might be possible with someone. Jake looked at her standing in the doorway to his bedroom, and he realized that she was offering him something he hadn't even known he was looking for. Not just physical connection, but the chance to be completely seen and understood by another person. Are you sure? He asked. I'm sure, Alex said. The question is, are you? Jake stood in his living room looking at Alex in his bedroom doorway. His heart was racing, but not just from attraction. Something deeper was happening here. Something that felt more significant than just two people reconnecting after years apart. Yes, he said finally. I'm sure. Alex smiled and extended her hand toward him. Jake walked over and took it, feeling the warmth of her fingers intertwining with his. She led him into his bedroom, but instead of what he expected to happen, she sat down on the edge of his bed and patted the space next to her. Sit with me, she said. I want to tell you something important. Jake sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. His bedroom felt different with Alex in it, less lonely, more alive. The lamp from his living room cast just enough light through the doorway to see her face clearly. Remember I told you I came here to finish something I'd been avoiding, Alex said. Yeah. Well, the truth is more complicated than I let on. Alex turned to face him completely. I'm not just leaving for London next week because of a job opportunity. I'm leaving because I'm trying to start over completely. Jake felt a flicker of concern. What do you mean? I mean, my life has been falling apart for the past year, and I finally realized I need to make some big changes. Alex took a deep breath. The job I had in Chicago ended badly. I was in a relationship with someone who seemed perfect on paper, but made me feel invisible every single day. I was living in an expensive apartment I couldn't really afford, trying to maintain this image of success that was completely exhausting. That sounds really hard, Jake said. It was, and the worst part was that I kept comparing everything to how I felt during those conversations we had in college. I would be at dinner with my ex and he would be talking about his work or his goals. And I would think about how you used to ask me questions that actually made me think. I would be at parties with people who seemed interesting and successful. And I would remember how comfortable I felt just talking to you about books. Jake was quiet, trying to process what Alex was telling him. So you've been thinking about me all these years? Not constantly, Alex said with a small laugh, but regularly. Enough that when everything fell apart last year, you were one of the first people I thought about. I kept wondering if you had found what you were looking for, if you were happy, if you ever thought about me too. I did think about you, Jake admitted. Not often, but sometimes. Usually when I was reading something I thought you would have had interesting opinions about. Alex smiled. What kinds of things? Articles about loneliness in modern society. Stories about people who felt disconnected despite being surrounded by others. Things that reminded me of our conversations about literature and real life. We really did understand each other back then, didn't we? I think we did, Jake said. I just didn't realize how rare that was until I didn't have it anymore. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Jake found himself studying Alex's profile in the dim light. There was something peaceful about being close to her like this. Something that felt both new and familiar at the same time. Can I ask you something? Jake said. Anything. When you saw that my relationship had ended, why didn't you reach out then? Why wait until now? Alex was quiet for a long moment. Because I was scared, she said finally. I was scared that you wouldn't remember me the way I remembered you. I was scared that what we had was just something I had imagined or built up in my mind. And I was scared that if I reached out and it wasn't what I hoped, I would lose even the memory of what those conversations meant to me. But you're not scared anymore? Oh, I'm terrified, Alex said with a laugh. But I'm also leaving the country in a week, which means this is my last chance to find out if what I remembered was real. Jake turned to look at her directly. And what have you discovered? I've discovered that you're exactly the person I thought you were, only more so. Alex reached over and took his hand again. You're still thoughtful and kind, and you still make people feel heard. But now you also have this quiet strength that comes from going through difficult things and surviving them. I don't feel very strong most days. That's what makes it real strength, Alex said. You don't perform it or announce it. You just keep showing up and being genuine even when things are hard. Jake felt that familiar tightness in his chest that came from being truly seen by another person. So what happens now? You're leaving next week. I know. The timing is terrible. Alex squeezed his hand. But I also think that sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need, even if it's not for very long. What do you think I need? I think you need to remember that you're worthy of being chosen by someone who really sees you. Alex's voice was gentle but certain. Your ex didn't leave because you weren't enough. She left because you weren't right for each other. There's a difference. Jake felt tears prick at his eyes unexpectedly. He hadn't realized how much he had been blaming himself for the breakup, until Alex offered him a different way to see it. And what do you need? Jake asked. I need to remember what it feels like to be completely honest with another person, Alex said. I need to remember that connection doesn't have to be performed or earned. Sometimes it just exists between two people who understand each other. They looked at each other in the dim light, and Jake felt like something important was being decided between them without words, not about what would happen tonight, but about how they would both carry this experience forward. Alex, Jake said, I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm glad you came here tonight. I'm glad you took the risk. Me too, Alex said. Even if it's complicated. Even if the timing isn't perfect. Maybe timing is overrated, Jake said. Maybe some connections are worth having even if they can't last forever. Alex leaned closer to him and Jake could smell the faint scent of rain still in her hair. Do you really believe that? I'm starting to, Jake said. You showing up tonight made me feel more like myself than I have in months. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, Alex said softly. She moved closer on the bed until she was sitting directly beside him, their legs touching. Jake could feel the warmth from her body and see the way the light caught in her eyes. I have a confession, Alex said. What? I've been wanting to do this since I got here tonight. Alex reached up and touched Jake's face gently, her fingers tracing along his jawline. Jake's breath caught. Do what? Instead of answering, Alex leaned in and kissed him softly. It was gentle and tentative at first, then deeper as Jake responded. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing a little harder. Was that okay? Alex asked. That was more than okay, Jake said. And then he kissed her back. They spent the next hour talking and holding each other, sharing stories about the past 5 years and dreams about the future. It wasn't about passion or urgency. It was about two people who had found each other again after years of feeling lost, taking time to really see and appreciate what they had discovered. As they lay together on his bed, fully clothed but closer than Jake had been to another person in months, Alex traced patterns on his chest with her finger. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For being exactly who I hoped you would be. For making me feel like the person I was in college still exists somewhere inside me. Jake tightened his arms around her. Thank you for showing up and reminding me who I am when I'm with someone who really sees me. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, but neither of them noticed. They were too busy discovering that sometimes the most meaningful connections happen not when everything is perfect, but when two people are brave enough to be completely honest about what they need from each other. Jake woke up to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. For a moment he was confused about why he felt so peaceful. Then he remembered. Alex was lying next to him, still wearing his college sweatshirt, her dark hair spread across his pillow. They had fallen asleep talking, her head on his shoulder, their hands intertwined. The clock on his nightstand showed 7:15 a.m. Jake had slept better than he had in months, despite having someone else in his bed for the first time since his breakup. There was something about Alex's presence that made him feel calm instead of anxious. Alex stirred beside him and opened her eyes slowly. When she saw him looking at her, she smiled, not the uncertain smile from last night, but something warm and genuine. Good morning, she said softly. Good morning, Jake replied. Did you sleep okay? Better than I have in a long time. Alex stretched and sat up in bed. Thank you for letting me stay. Thank you for being here, Jake said, and he meant it in a way that went far beyond just providing a place to sleep. They looked at each other in the morning light, and Jake could see that something had shifted for both of them overnight. The desperate loneliness he had been carrying for months felt lighter somehow, as if Alex had helped him remember that he was capable of connecting with another person. I should probably get ready to go, Alex said, though she didn't sound eager to leave. "When is your flight?" Jake asked. "This evening. I need to pick up my things from the hotel where I left my luggage and get to the airport by 6. The reality of her departure hit Jake suddenly. In a few hours, Alex would be gone, and he had no idea when or if he would see her again. The thought should have made him sad, but instead he felt grateful. Whatever this had been between them, it had given him something important. "Before you go," Jake said, "I want you to know that last night changed something for me." Alex turned to look at him fully. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been walking around for months feeling like I was invisible, like I didn't matter to anyone. You showed up and reminded me that I have value, that the things about me that my ex saw as boring or limiting are actually strengths." "They are strengths," Alex said firmly. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Jake got out of bed and walked to his kitchen to make coffee. Alex followed him, and they moved around his small space with surprising ease, as if they had been sharing mornings for years instead of just one night. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said as he measured coffee grounds. "Of course. Do you really think this London job is what you want, or are you running away from something?" Alex was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Maybe both," she said finally. "I think I need to get away from the life I built here that wasn't working. But I also think London represents a chance to start over and be more intentional about the choices I make." "What kind of choices?" "Like choosing to be with people who actually see me instead of people who look good on paper. Like choosing work that feels meaningful instead of just impressive. Like choosing to be honest about what I want instead of what I think I should want." Jake poured water into his coffee maker and turned it on. "Those sound like good choices. Last night helped me understand what I'm looking for," Alex said. "Being here with you reminded me what it feels like when someone really understands you. I want to find that again, even if it takes time." "You will," Jake said with certainty. "You're too genuine not to find someone who appreciates that." Alex smiled and walked over to him. "You're going to be okay too, you know." "Better than okay. How can you be so sure?" "Because I can see who you really are underneath all the self-doubt and loneliness. You're the kind of person who makes other people feel safe and valued. Once you start believing that about yourself, you'll attract someone who sees it too." Jake felt that familiar tightness in his chest, the feeling of being truly seen and appreciated. "I hope you're right." "I know I'm right," Alex said. "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll stop hiding from people. Stop assuming you're too boring or not exciting enough. The right person will love exactly who you are." "I promise," Jake said, and he meant it. They spent the morning talking over coffee and toast, sharing more stories about their lives and dreams. Alex told him about her plans for London, the marketing firm she would be working with, the neighborhood where she had found an apartment, her hopes for starting fresh in a new city. Jake told her about his ideas for improving the app his company was building, and his secret dream of maybe starting his own business someday. Around noon, Alex gathered her things and prepared to leave. Jake watched her fold his sweatshirt and place it on his bed, then pick up her small black bag from by the door. "Keep the sweatshirt," Jake said. "Something to remember this by." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Besides, it looks better on you anyway." Alex smiled and put the sweatshirt back in her bag. Then she walked over to Jake and hugged him tightly. He held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair one more time. "Thank you," Alex said into his shoulder. "For everything." "Thank you," Jake replied. "For showing up when I needed someone to remind me who I am." They broke apart and Alex looked at him seriously. "I want you to know that I meant everything I said last night." "You're special, Jake. Don't forget that." "You're pretty special yourself," Jake said. "London is lucky to have you." Alex kissed him one more time, gentle and sweet, then stepped back. "Take care of yourself." "You too." "And Alex?" "Yeah?" "If you ever want to talk to someone who understands you, you have my number." "Same goes for you," Alex said. "Always." Jake walked her to the door and watched as she headed down the hallway toward the elevator. She turned back once to wave, and then she was gone. Jake closed his door and leaned against it, looking around his apartment. It looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, but it felt completely different. The emptiness that had been weighing on him for months was still there, but it no longer felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like space waiting to be filled with better things. Over the next few weeks, Jake found himself making changes he had been putting off for months. He organized his bills and set up a proper budget. He called his college friend Ryan, whom he hadn't talked to since the breakup, and they made plans to get dinner. He even signed up for a hiking group that met on weekends, something his ex had always suggested, but he had been too nervous to try. At work, Jake started speaking up more in meetings, sharing ideas he previously would have kept to himself. His confidence grew as he realized that his thoughtful approach to problems was actually valuable to his team. When his boss mentioned the possibility of a promotion, Jake didn't immediately assume he wasn't qualified enough. 3 months after Alex's visit, Jake met someone new. Her name was Riley, and she worked at the coffee shop near his office. She had been serving him coffee for weeks before he finally worked up the courage to ask her out. What surprised him was how natural the conversation felt, how comfortable he was being himself around her. On their 3rd date, Riley told him that she appreciated how he really listened when she talked, how he asked thoughtful questions that showed he was paying attention. Jake thought about Alex and smiled. "What's that smile about?" Riley asked. "Just remembering something a friend told me once," Jake said, "about how the right person will appreciate exactly who you are." "Well, your friend was smart," Riley said. "Whoever they are." 6 months later, Jake received a postcard from London. The front showed a photo of the Thames at sunset, and the back had a short message in Alex's handwriting. "Found a flat near the river and a job I actually love. Met someone who asked me questions that make me think. Thank you for helping me remember what I was looking for. Hope you're remembering what you're worth." Jake smiled and put the postcard on his refrigerator. That evening when Riley came over for dinner, she noticed it. "Who's A?" she asked, not jealous but curious. "Someone who helped me understand some important things about myself," Jake said honestly, right when I needed to hear them. Riley nodded, seeming to understand that some connections in life were meaningful without being threatening to current relationships. "Sounds like a good friend." She was, Jake said, for exactly the right amount of time. That night, as Jake lay in bed with Riley sleeping peacefully beside him, he thought about the strange chain of events that had led him here. Alex showing up on that rainy night had changed everything, not because they had started a relationship, but because she had reminded him of who he was when he was with someone who truly saw him. Sometimes the most important people in your life aren't the ones who stay forever. Sometimes they're the ones who show up exactly when you need them, help you remember your worth, and then trust you to carry that knowledge forward into something even better. Jake smiled in the darkness and pulled Riley a little closer. Some connections last a lifetime and others last just long enough to change everything. Both kinds, he had learned, were exactly what they needed to be.